first year has been extremely impactful for the story. Like, what is the story we really want to tell that's authentic to who we are as a brand? And you don't really become become the brand and become what it is that you're trying to do until you finally get it out there, right? So there's so much of that story that's developing, that's actually impacting and changing the way I want to be a leader for the people that work with me.
Let's link up with Krysta on the FYX. She's a wellness coach with a focus on mental well-being and physical strength.
What's happening, FYX listeners? Welcome back to our latest episode of the FYX podcast. I'm your host, Krysta Huber, and we're joined this week by our second, you'll hear me mention this, repeat guest. I don't have many repeat guests on the show. So lucky to have so many people who are willing to come on and the opportunity to have lots of different types of conversations with so many different types of businesses, people with different experiences, perspectives, all of it. But I wanted to bring this guest back on, my friend Steven, who is the founder of Orka Bar. If you guys caught the episode we did last year, I've linked it down in the show notes. And this one was really fun because it was essentially an update on where the business is today, what his brand is doing to disrupt the sweet treat frozen industry. If you weren't around, if you weren't a listener of the show, or if you just missed this episode last year, Orka Bar is a delicious. When I tell you I'm obsessed with them, they're so good. Anybody who has ever tried them immediately messages me and is like, I need to eat 3 more of these. It is a protein ice cream bar, has a similar look and feel to a Klondike bar, but way better macros, way less sugar, truly a healthy for you sweet treat. And who doesn't love a good sweet treat, right? So encourage you guys. Last year at this time, it was really only available to people locally, but as you'll hear Steven with his amazing updates about the growth of the business, they're now shipping to 22 states, which is really, really cool and just so amazing to be able to support and watch the journey. So the first episode we did was more around how Steven even got into entrepreneurship, why he saw that as a potential path for himself. We talked a lot about a previous product that he created, but didn't officially take to market due to restrictions with COVID and supply chain issues and a few other things, and how that eventually turned into his quest that would become Orka Bar and everything that stands for today. In this conversation, we get the updates. We get to hear where the company's going, how they're growing, more about the creation side of the actual product itself, what he's learned as an entrepreneur, stepping into more of a leadership role and coming out of being the cook in the kitchen, so to speak. So this is a really fun one. And at the very end, you'll hear him leave you with something that I want to bring up before we even dive into the rest of this conversation. And that's the importance of reflection. I made a really strong parallel to the idea that reflection is actually a huge part of your journey when it comes to making changes and making permanent, lasting changes to your health and your fitness. And when you think about it, as somebody who is a big proponent of tracking food and logging other data about yourself, your stress levels, your energy levels, your, how things change for my ladies out there with your cycle, any kind of PMS symptoms that you may be experiencing, the quality of your sleep, that requires a level of reflection, a level of self-awareness, an intention of taking pause in your day and thinking about, how do I feel? Taking that inventory of your body to help you actually get way more in touch with the markers, the signs that your body's giving you to show you whether you're in a healthy state or whether you have areas to improve. And so often we get so caught up with the scale being the main metric for that. But for those of you who have listened to the show for a long time, for those of you who are current or former clients of the Fitness Fix, you know that we really stand for this truly holistic approach. And when I use the term holistic, what I mean is thinking about all of the other signs, the other markers, the other indicators that help you really decide if a certain food is for you, if a certain activity is for you, if a certain schedule is for you, if a specific aspect of your lifestyle really aligns with the person that you want to become. That applies to business. It applies to health and nutrition. And this conversation was just a really nice way to kind of tie those two things together. So with that, go check out Orka Bar, get your hands on some, get it into your freezer, and send me and Steven a DM to let us know how much you love them. The flavors are awesome. My personal favorite is the raspberry, but I do truly love all four. And I'm just excited to continue to see where this company goes. So, welcome, Steven Longo, to the FYX podcast. Steven, welcome back to the FYX podcast. I don't know if I told you this, but you're only my second repeat guest. So, pretty special.
Wow, that does make me feel pretty good,
Yeah.
actually.
You should feel honored for that. No, but really, we did have so much fun in our first interview. And for everybody who has listened to that one, you guys are definitely going to look forward to this conversation as essentially a continuation of that a whole year later, catching up with Steven on all things Orka Bar, which we will dive right into. But for those of you who didn't catch this first episode when we did it last year, I am going to repeat the first two questions just because they're like my signature questions every time I have a guest on the show.
I'm
So,
ready.
first up, what is your go to coffee order? What's in that mug over there that I saw you sip on right before we started?
So you are going to laugh, but in this mug is actually just hot water.
Oh, okay. Wait, do you not drink coffee? I don't even remember from when I asked you this the first time.
So it's weird. Like when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I actually have to do is eat. Like
That's
if I
good.
eat, that's like all I need. I haven't
That's
like
your energy.
exactly right. Like that's exactly what I need to consume in order to pick me up and kind of spark the day and get me going.
Okay.
But it's odd because like on the weekends, if I'm going out to breakfast or going out to lunch or like a dinner or something like that, is really when for some reason I start to crave like caffeine or coffee.
Mm,
And honestly, I'm a big just black shot of espresso
simple.
kind of person. Exactly right. So yeah, that would be my go-to.
Nice. Very cool. Well, I say this every time I have a guest, but most of the people that come on the show like keep it pretty simple and they have a very typical order. So, hey, we get our caffeine in and we're good to go for the day. But like I was about to say, it is good for you to actually drink before drinking your coffee to get some food into your system because it's better for your hormones. It's better for your cortisol awakening response. So, little do you know, you're making a good health decision over there.
Hell yeah, I knew there was something about it. There had to be
Yes.
something.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, second question, and maybe you'll have a little bit of a different answer to this one this time. But as you know, from having been a guest on the show, I love the opportunity to sit down with people and learn more about them. And of course, we want to understand the resume. We want to understand what it is that you do. But beyond that, what I think is more interesting and a little bit more compelling and makes for a really cool conversation is who are you at your core? Like, who is Steven? Rather than the resume, if I really wanted to get to know you on that deeper level, what are you going to say about yourself to describe you?
Wow, that's a good question. I think there is this like intense drive for like proving myself to
Mm,
myself. There's something about the challenge that being an entrepreneur provides itself to fulfilling my life personally that really gets me up and going. Like I remember I remember being, I'm not even sure if I shared this story the last time, but I remember being in high school and I was in an English class and it was just before AP exams. It was an AP English class. And
okay.
if you know, when you go to take the AP exam, should you pass, the credits for that year can be applied to college. And you maybe not having to take a certain level of that course at
Mhm.
university or wherever it is you're going. So the day before, a couple days before that exam, my teacher pulled me aside and was just like, "Hey, like, I know it's been not the easiest ride for you, this year. So if you didn't want to show up to the exam in the next couple days, like I completely understand. It would be a waste of time." Basically telling me like, "Don't go, like you're gonna fail," kind of
Like
thing.
there was no way you were gonna. I think you had to get a four for it
Yeah,
to
right.
count,
And
right? Yeah.
and so I was just like, wow. I was like, no, man, I'm gonna go. I am going to give it my all. And long story short, took the exam. He winds up saving my score for last after he did the entire class, brought me up, told me I got a four, apologized for literally kind of giving me that sort of sentiment, before going into
Doubt.
the,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly, and doubt before going into the test. And it was like, after that, there's been kind of this like needing to like prove to myself, prove to others that I can like really do something. And I think going out on this journey with Orca is the perfect like test to see if I can really hold up. Now, obviously, I'm completely, aware and conscious of like external factors playing a huge part in not being able to do something, or you know
Mhm.
what I mean? Like just things that are out of my control, but it won't be because I didn't give it everything I had.
Sure.
So I
And I
think,
think, so not to cut you off, but I'm curious, like now that you're kind of framing this way, have you ever thought whether that kind of influenced the decision to go into the food space and ice cream in particular? Like, I know from our first conversation and obviously from talking to you that a lot of this was just driven by your own challenges around digestion and realizing like, hey, I want a sweet treat. This will be easier to digest. I can get more protein in it. It's better for me. But I do think there's like a factor to having chosen the food space, and like CPG is tough, but I think ice cream inside of that is even tougher, as I'm sure you can attest to and what you've learned over the last like now almost 3 years, right? But have you ever thought about that?
oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is a plus to going into CPG, especially in food and beverage. And I'll say this, it's because it's consumable, right?
Mhm.
Whenever you think about going out on an entrepreneurial journey and you think of going into either a product or a service, is going to be your business model, right?
Sure.
Products need to be well, when you're going into food and beverage, it needs to be repeated. You're talking about reoccurring purchases, you're talking about people eating something, enjoying it. And so I knew if I was going to go into something else, I kind of wanted it to be in that area if I was going to go back into anything at all. And it just so happened to, like you mentioned, spark something in me that was like, hey, I think there's a gap right now in this area, especially in frozen. We've seen so much success within the performance and protein bar category, obviously at a shelf stable category. And now
Sure.
with the, surgence of products like the Perfect Bar and Mush Protein Bar has actually just come out with a refrigerated brand
Oh, I didn't know that.
version.
So
Yeah.
they're getting out of the like there is this a new SKU on top of like the oatmeal?
Yeah, that's
Oh,
correct.
cool. Interesting.
Yeah, yeah, they just launched it like recently, actually. It's
Nice.
very, very new. Um, But I think it's showing that there's an opportunity to introduce something even more refreshing, right,
Mhm.
into the frozen
Mhm.
category.
Fair.
And there's a lot of, data and science obviously backing after a workout, after just an activity that replenishing your body with something that is cold not only is great for uh, uh, you know, um, from just a hydration perspective, but also it helps lower your core body temperature.
Sure.
And why not make that thing frozen, right? So there was all of this kind of like, I think we got something here. Let me try and really go after this. Let me attack the market in this way. So that was like one of the positive aspects is that I love the fact that it could be consumable, repeated. And then now, after introducing myself to the entire category, it's kind of, wow, there are obviously all these other challenges, right? Which every product I think has along the way. And specifically, as you mentioned, being in frozen, right, is extremely difficult. Most expensive shelf space. It requires, a whole lot more in terms of quality control, in terms of
Mhm.
getting it through the supply chain properly. It's more expensive just to keep from a manufacturing and production perspective. So yeah, there's a lot there to balance out, but so far the pros have certainly outweighed the cons.
Yeah, and obviously I want to get into all the pros and the growth you've had along the journey because, comparing even just looking from what I've seen you share with me and post on social media with the growth you're having from going from like the pop-up phase at a lot of different gyms, events, various studios to now seeing like more like permanent locations with partnerships through some of the supplements companies, through gyms that have freezer locations that you're setting up and all that kind of stuff. I definitely want to get into that. But for the benefit of the listener, because this took us a little while in the first episode we did, since we were getting so much into like your backstory and your journey through entrepreneurship, period, even with the first product that you developed. Let's give everybody like the elevator pitch on what the heck is Orka Bar, what are some of the ingredients, and just, get into like some of the things you're already kind of implying about being in the frozen space. It's obviously ice cream, but let's give the listener the breakdown on the protein element, the egg whites, all of it.
Sure. So the elevator pitch is Orka Bar is a refreshingly cold and creamy, high protein, low carb, low sugar, and gluten-free bar made from the goodness of egg whites. And
So good, everybody. Like, so good.
we currently have four flavors: cookies and cream, raspberry, mint, and a vanilla bean. And what's really unique about being able to lead with egg whites is it gives the user the ability to digest it more properly through the system, right? So we also, from a high protein perspective, every bar comes in at 15 grams of protein, and a lot of that is coming from either the egg whites or more of a whey isolate that we add in order to remove a lot of that overall lactose, again,
Mhm.
making it more digestible for the consumer. As you had mentioned before, digestibility was a big position behind wanting to come up with this product and this idea in the first place for myself.
Sure.
And and then from there, the product, high protein, it's low in carbs. We come in around 5 grams of sugar on average per bar. Um, you also get a great source of fiber. There's about 6 grams of fiber, 9 net carbs. So from just a macronutritional value, it really stands out against any competition there in the frozen category. And yeah, it's been going really well, and we're looking forward to, kind of seeing where we can continue to advance the formula and the recipe to make even a stronger macronutritional profile while keeping ingredients clean, while keeping and the taste and texture where we've gotten it today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the last point you just made too on taste and texture, it's like everybody out there listening, if you're a macro tracker, and obviously all of my clients who listen are, and I know Stephen, you have plenty of experience with macro tracking and coaching yourself in the past. We get creative when it comes to trying to come up with something to satisfy that sweet treat, whether it is, other things in the same space, like if we've talked about the Yasso bar, right? Like I think that's one when people think of something that fits well within their macros, but it doesn't have near the protein, right? So in
Right.
terms of like the purpose that it serves, we all kind of can think of something that we can substitute in if we're looking for a sweet treat that has like a better macro profile. But I've definitely had some experiments of things that I've made by myself that I'm like, this did not go well in terms of, and I think the fiber one is such a big point too, because if I had to pick something that I think is very overlooked when it
Yeah.
comes to understanding nutrition, but then kind of taking macros and, let's say, maturing along your journey in terms of really prioritizing food quality. Anybody who's listening to this, I promise you, if you've never paid attention to tracking your food in any kind of way, do it for even just like 2 or 3 days and pay attention to your fiber, because 9 out of 10 people are getting like less than 15 grams on average per day, and we should be closer to 25. So if you can grab another 6 to 7 grams off of a sweet treat, that's like a double win in my book.
Oh yeah, I couldn't agree more. And again, that was such a big part of the intention before even bringing out the first product that I ever developed, right? A couple years ago. It was like, oh,
Yeah.
this is good, but how do I really land on something that's properly balanced? That was super important. And it took a while, but I think taking that time to really come out with this, and again, V1, right? This is like version one of really what
Right.
it is that we've come to market with. And I
Sure.
think there's only room to expand and be better versions of ourselves as a product and a brand overall as we continue.
Yeah. So diving a little deeper into, the recipe development side of the process, take me back to when you were first experimenting in your own kitchen and trying to put this together. I know the original inspiration was the feeling of a Klondike bar, that kind of consistency. You wanted it to be something you could grab. But do you have any fun stories or anecdotes around maybe like the first batch you ever made and being like, this isn't it? Like, what happened?
So I will tell you that stepping into kind of the process of developing this product, I really tiptoed into it.
Okay.
So the first version of it overall wasn't, it didn't have as much protein, it didn't have as much fiber, it was more of kind of hitting more of the indulgent category than the
Okay.
nutrition and performance side of the category. And it was great. I mean, it was like first time, unbelievable, shared it with my family. Everybody loved it. They were like, this is fantastic. And it was from that day, I was like, okay, now how do I just continue to take baby steps to adjusting certain fat, certain carbs, certain fiber, protein, sugar content, everything little by little to get it to a place where I continue the amazing response to this texture and to this mouthfeel, but
Right.
also add in the nutritional value as well. And so uh, that is when it started to then get very difficult. And, as I've told you before, working out of your home kitchen isn't the ideal environment when you're trying to make
Yeah.
something frozen. I know people have had a lot of success with like cuisine arts and making their own ice creams at home and thinking and things like that. And obviously baking is a huge success in the oven. But when you try to start to scale a frozen product out of your own kitchen, that's when it really starts to get very difficult because the equipment that you're using isn't, meant to be produced in large quantities. It's meant to be small for yourself or for your
Right.
family. And so I started running into a lot of challenges with regards to stabilization of the end result, right? Of the end product. Working through the summer was extremely difficult because then heat was playing a part, everything from biometric pressure to humidity. I would be making the product, in the afternoon when like the humidity was lowest, and it was like incredible. It was wild how quickly I realized I needed to get out of my kitchen
Yeah.
and get into a space that would be more conducive to producing like the quality thing that I wanted to make.
Yeah, little did you know you were going to have to become like a meteorologist just to be able to get the
Yeah,
formula right in the beginning, right?
I can tell you about this one time too. So in our product, also something that we don't waver from is we don't use any sort of, you know, uh, how do you laboratory created dyes. So we
Mhm.
use dyes from organic vegetables, beets, carrots, things like that, turmeric to create the colors for our product. And that does make it a little more difficult to do because those colorings aren't as stable as the ones that are manufactured in a facility.
Okay.
Um, and we wound up going with a product that just didn't come out right. And I remember making a mint batch of bars that needed to go out, right? I was already behind on so many orders that were coming in, and it turned the entire batch blue instead of green.
Oh,
And I
no
remember
way.
being like, "Oh my God, what do I do? Do I just switch it up and call it like Arctic mint or like, you know what I mean? Just like
Yeah.
make it something else." And I was
That
like,
was a clever save, though.
yeah, I wound up I wound up like reaching out to all of those buyers though and actually saying, "Hey, I deeply apologize, but we're not going to be able to fulfill this mint order for you today because there was." And even though it was, and I just kind of was completely transparent with them. I was like, "Look, we had coloring that turned it blue instead of green."
Yeah.
And a lot of them, I would say 90% of them were like, "That's fine. I'll take the blue. That sounds kind of cool." And I was like, it was like the inner founder in me of needing it to be perfect in order
Perfect.
for it to come out. Was like I can't do it. It's too weird to bite into it and kind of the color that really sends a message to the brain as to what it's eating, right? When you eat something blue and minty, it says something totally different versus something green and minty, right?
Yeah, I didn't think about that, but that is a very good point. You're so right. And I also think what you mentioned there about like the perfectionist piece of, hey, this is my product, this is my baby. And also, you said this at the very beginning of this conversation, just around the consistency and the importance of consistency from batch to batch, right? And how that's obviously a requirement as you continue to grow in thinking about like really stepping into the commercial space even further. So totally understand where you're coming from on that, but I think it also goes to show you that the customer response of like, hey, we don't care because they know it tastes good, right? And
Mhm.
that's what they were coming there for is also an important thing to strike that balance with too. And I think sometimes as a founder, that's something that we have to remember. Like we could sit there and beat ourselves up about certain things that the consumer might not even know is
Right.
happening on the other side, right?
Right.
Yeah. So that's cool. That's a good story. And I remember you telling me too. I think we talked about this on the last episode, or if we had had it in a one-off conversation between the two of us. One of the when you first like kind of transitioned seasons and the summer came around and you were still cooking in your own kitchen, you were like, oh my gosh, I need to move a little bit more quickly here if I want these things to stay frozen.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the freezer door that we have here is kind of like a half freezer, like
Yeah. Okay.
bifold door. So
Uh-huh.
it's extremely tiny. And
Gotcha.
so it was quickly moving things in and out of that freezer as fast as possible in order to get things done. And, it's there just wasn't a lot of space to keep up,
Mm,
and obviously needing to move so fast because of the heat, right? And
sure.
controlling, like you're saying, that temperature control is so key, obviously, with the frozen product. And it was kind of this catch 22 of, oh man, I need to get out of here and into a space that works, because not only is it difficult to stabilize frozen, but now it's summer and things are really picking up. Like,
Yeah. More people want it, the
yeah,
demand. Yeah.
exactly. So it was like, I got to make a change.
Yeah. That makes a ton of sense. So walk us through the journey from you and I don't know that you're still doing some of this, but you can kind of update me and the listeners on it. Doing your own deliveries, driving around Monmouth and Ocean counties in the back of your car with a cooler, transporting and dropping off different orders of Orka bars to now, as I mentioned, being in certain retail locations where you have a dedicated freezer set up, but also getting into the shipping scene too. What has that journey been like for you?
Yeah, it was, as you know, not going to work if I was going to be hand delivering this product to all of my customers
Yeah.
online. But there was something uniquely special about starting in that way that
Mm.
really created a sense of trust and just a sense of identity for this grassroots movement behind starting everything the way
Yeah,
that
I think we
we're
talked for like
starting.
an hour the first time that we met, and I learned so much about the bars, even in that interaction.
Yeah, and I'll actually call something out right now too. A friend of yours that purchased the product winds up messaging you on the side after I delivered to her personally and was like, "Oh my God, it's great, but how is he ever gonna do this if he's delivering to
Yeah.
everybody?"
Like she
Uh,
loved it and
yeah,
appreciated it, but she also wanted you to grow. So she was like, how
yeah.
is this going to continue? Yeah.
So I wound up and this actually just kind of recently happened. So it was in August that we officially opened up a frozen shipping solution for all of our direct to consumer purchasers, and also now my wholesale buyers as well. But it was a couple months of just kind of back and forth experimentation and testing in terms of, UPS providing us that shipping solution,
Hmm.
and then finding a good supplier for a cooler system of the right thickness and size for us
Okay.
to put in the box, and then working with a supplier around dry ice that would also give us the opportunity to fulfill through those means and still be profitable by doing it, because it's very difficult to ship profitably frozen, right? Especially
Yeah.
when you're at such an early stage that we're
Sure.
in. Which is why, cost tends to be a little higher for delivery and things like that in order to supplement that kind of thing. But you kind of have to do that in the beginning. And your early adopters are what make you being a success so important and impactful. Um, so we opened up a frozen shipping solution in August, which has been going super well. We originally started it in just 8 states, so kind of just like the little the little nook around New Jersey, if you would, right, where we're
Yeah.
located. And then just a couple months ago, we I opened it up to 22 states. So now we're shipping to the
Nice.
entire kind of Northeast, all the way down to Georgia, and then over to a little bit of the Midwest. And again, I really owe it to the advancements in fulfillment on the UPS side. I mean, the fact that they can get our product to the consumer in 24 to 48 hours
Yeah,
within
because I
that.
would imagine that's got to be like one of the biggest hurdles from a logistics perspective. It's makes a ton of sense to hear you say there's kind of like three factors, right? It's like not just the dry ice, but like the vendor portion of that, then like the cooler. And now I'm blanking on the third thing you said, but as you're saying it, there were kind of three components to it. But the time piece has to be huge
Yeah.
because it's like, yeah, we could have the dry ice and everything set up and ready to go. But if it's not getting to them within less than 2 days, it's like the dry ice is only going to last so long.
Oh yeah, and look, there have been, times where it didn't make it, right?
Mm.
And or, the consumer gets back to their door after a day of work, and that was kind of the
And it's been sitting there.
and it's been sitting there, and it was the
That's
summer,
tough. Yeah,
and it just didn't make it. And it's great that people are understanding, because we're going to be understanding, right?
sure.
We're not going to have the type of company that is like, oh well, sorry it didn't make it, or something. Like, no, 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 we're going to send you out another order that you had put in first thing Monday morning. That's when we fulfill, and we'll make sure we pack this time with extra dry ice just in case. And consumers are extremely, appreciative of that. Like, that's all anybody
Yeah.
wants, is to be heard and then taken care of. So to answer your question again, that has now been completely instilled and implemented. We're doing that with all of our direct to consumer purchases now. So I'm no longer driving to a person's house. Although if there's someone that's close to where we produce around Asbury Park in New Jersey, I will sometimes still make that journey just for fun,
Yeah.
because I
The
enjoy
nostalgia of it.
yeah, and I just enjoy still, seeing somebody's face and getting their feedback and hearing what they think. And then we've also started to move our wholesale buyers that are, outside of a certain zone into that fulfillment strategy as well. But there's also a big benefit and an impact to, I believe, still going in and shaking hands with those, people that again, these small business owners that are making it possible for us to, expand our reach, right, into more
Yeah.
mouths, into more consumers and a larger audience. So, uh, I'm still making those deliveries all the time, which I
Yeah.
which I appreciate and love.
And let's talk about that too. I obviously mentioned like some of the locations, but feel free to expand on different partners that you have in different examples. But knowing that you have a more unique take and trying to make it more performance based and really hitting what we talked about with protein and fiber and really quality, solid macros here, what is the typical business owner's reaction when you're coming to meet them for the first time, getting them introduced to the product? What are some of the things they're saying to you, especially relative to maybe the other products that they do have in their space?
Yeah. So I think to start that off, when we first chatted last year, we were in 0 store locations.
Mm-hmm.
And today we've managed to get into a little over 30 locations, which is a
Amazing.
combination of smaller kind of nutrition and supplement stores. So smaller, like GNC, Vitamin Shop style companies, as well as then gyms. Like you mentioned, CrossFit has been a huge supporter, that community of us, as well as just your local, like kind of retro fitnesses, Crunch Fitness, the larger kind of franchise model gym organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And we're now also starting to step into very slowly on true grocery. And
Cool.
the reason being is we have on the back end our new packaging coming in soon. So we're finally going to transition out of the box that I'm purchasing on Amazon and the
Mhm.
stickers that go around it to like a true commercial packaging product, which is not only going to give us the confidence, but have us walk into a retail company looking more professional, right? They
Yeah,
have a certain
totally.
aesthetic that they want to put on their shelf, and it's important to line up, right, with that vision that they have for what they're doing. So we've been seeing the success in that space today, and it's still astounding to me at like how how positive the response is. For some reason, when I walk into these, small businesses and I say, "Hey, here's a box of our product, give them a try. I think your audience and consumers would really love them. We'd love a chance to, set up a table and share some free samples." They either bite into it right then and there, and I have to be like, "Oh, that was just on some dry ice. It might be a little too hard. Like, give it a couple." Um, or, they'll reach out the next day and they'll be like, wow, this was fantastic. Like, when can we bring you in? And I'm like, I'm always for some, still shocked at how the reaction that people have to the product. We're like, this is fantastic. And it's made from egg whites. What? Like, it has this much protein. Like, they look at the nutritional value and like, this is an amazing macros on this product.
Yeah.
Um, and so we're just continuing to kind of move in this direction around a strategy that I'm kind of calling just like owning our home. Like, I really want to continue to expand within the tri-state area. So New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, because there's just so much ground there to cover from, again, in a a community perspective that we're starting to build with the brand, right? Where we're actually doing an event and people have heard of it. I
Hmm.
mean, I can't tell you how warming that is to like feel as a founder where like you go to an event in North Jersey or somewhere you haven't even been yet and someone's like, "Oh, I've heard of your brand. Like I've been meaning or like wanting to try it." And I'm like, "That's so cool." That's really awesome. Um so yeah, we're seeing a lot of success within that health and wellness side, and we're going to continue to hit the market there as just like a true early adopter strategy within that audience.
Yeah. I love this take of owning your home. I think that's a really cool way of describing it because you said earlier, you use the words like grassroots, right? With us describing like you being the one to literally drive around, drop everything off. And I think that in the world we live in today, there is this assumption of like, in order to be successful, you should be utilizing the technology and all these like different aspects of doing things faster or more efficiently right away. However, the trust factor that is huge, even in my space. Like, there's so many nutrition coaches out there. Why should you pick me? Or why do I feel that this potential client is like aligned with working inside of the fitness fix? Has everything to do with us probably connecting on something on social media that really had nothing to do with nutrition. Like,
Mhm.
truthfully, a lot of times I find that the content that I do about relationships, and I usually make it funny. And so it's very relatable to people because they're like, oh, yeah, I've been in that situation too. That often blossoms into the next kind of phase of the conversation that gets the person talking about nutrition, their fitness, maybe not prioritizing themselves, not taking their self care seriously enough, feeling overwhelmed by work, whatever it is. But the last two things I just listed technically have nothing to do with fitness, right?
Mhm.
So it's like, yes, like they know, like you can look at my Instagram page the same way you look at Orka Bar's Instagram page and you know it's a product, you know I'm selling some kind of service. But I think that adding that personal touch back into it and taking out the anonymity of like, yeah, you could go get a Yasso bar just to keep with the brand that I mentioned before, but I don't really know anything about the history of Yasso. And I think it's cool to buy something when you do know the history behind it and how it got started. Like, we've talked about this podcast together, but I love listening to how I built this
Yeah.
because you get to hear about, and especially when it is some of these big brands, like it's cool to hear about the story. Like every time I talk to you, the story that always pops into my mind because I've heard it on the how I built this podcast is the what is now they have lots of different products, but what really started as like more of a granola company is purely Elizabeth, because the founder of that company, she started by like going to races like 5Ks and that kind of stuff, and originally thought she was gonna, I think, sell some sort of health coaching, but it ultimately blossomed into she made these muffins because she knew that if she made muffins, it would get people to come to her table to
Yeah.
actually talk to her about that. And that's all everybody wanted. And in a way, it was almost by accident. But I think it's really cool to tie this back into this idea of like knowing the founder and knowing the history and knowing that journey. Like for me, that makes me want to buy a product even more.
Yeah, I agree. And it's something I am constantly developing, right? This first year has been extremely impactful for the story. Like, what is the story we really want to tell that's authentic to who we are as a brand? And you don't really become the brand and become what it is that you're trying to do until you finally get it out there, right? So there's so much of that story that's developing, that's actually impacting and changing the way I want to be a leader for the people
Mhm.
that work with me and the way I want this brand to be, you know, or have a advantage or a competitive advantage in the marketplace and how it resonates with our target audience and with consumers. And I think this first year has been a big, learning experience with that, right? Where I have the story I want to tell with how I developed it. But then there's this part of the story that you only learn when you actually bring the product to market with
True.
where it actually sits into the hearts and the minds of your consumer. And that part of the brand story also needs to come through. And that's something we're strategically working in the background on further developing out over the next kind of 3 to 6 months as we've been able to take in all of this feedback and insight from our early adopters today.
Yeah, like understanding like when are people eating it, who in their family is eating it,
Yeah,
right? Like to be able to tell the story behind the, not only like you said, it's kind of like phase one was the story behind the development, how the product came to be, and now it's like moving into phase two is like how is the consumer interacting with this. And I think some people hear that and they're like, well, people are just eating it, and it's like yes, but there's so much more to that, because when somebody buys something, going back to the trust factor, the word I said, relatability, the reason why someone wants to buy something is because they see themselves inside of that story. They see themselves inside of that interaction in some way.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's really cool. So, I want to ask you a question going back to shipping real quick. You mentioned the expansion to 22 states. What's the furthest you guys have officially shipped at this point? What
God,
state?
I think, well, don't hold me to knowing the exact distance from here to there, but I'll say, we're all the way down to, we've shipped all the way down to Georgia quite a few times, and
Cool.
then all the way out to, Illinois.
Nice.
Yeah,
And the
we're,
customers there, how have they found you? Word of mouth?
it's been word of mouth.
Cool.
We're starting to experiment a little bit more with, you know, uh, like influencer marketing where we
Mhm.
can and kind of positioning ourselves with certain individuals around those fulfillment zones.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, it's been just word of mouth and people, emailing saying, "Hey, heard about you here," or, "I came to this event," right? Or "I was in town for this market or this pop-up or something like that." And then they go back home, right? And then
Mm.
they're now able to purchase the product, which has been really, really cool. When you see that order come through and you're like, "How did this person even find us?" You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I love asking that question for that reason. Cause then it's like the whole theory of life with like the invisible string of like, how did this all kind of come together?
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool. And there's one thing that we're certainly looking forward to, and it's being able to expand around that distribution. And,
Mhm.
a big part of my role and responsibility is putting together a strategy on how to do that. And something we're really excited about is after, 6 to 7 months of an application process in August, we heard back from the New Jersey Department of Science, Innovation, and Technology, and we were awarded the full grant to work with the Rutgers Food Innovation
That's
Lab.
amazing. Congratulations.
And so we've been, 3, 4 months into working with them, and our objective is to get this product to a place where it's kind of that V2 of the
Sure.
formula in terms of supply chain and being more resilient, right, through that process, as well as how do we scale Orka Bar for mass production so we can confidently go out to, those bigger box stores and really start to introduce ourselves through those windows and opportunities. And that's going to be a huge player and have a huge impact in our ability to continue to expand to some of those farther reach areas where people are emailing from Oregon and
Yeah.
California and all that kind of stuff.
So with that in mind, if we fast forward to, a year from now, the end of 2025 going into 2026, what do you hope to be able to say about the updates on Orca Bar and where you guys have grown and improved and continued to iterate?
Yeah, I really hope that if there's a third, podcast between the two of us, maybe
Yeah.
a year from now, we'll hopefully be in some of those traditional commercial stores, Whole Foods, Sprouts, a couple of your smaller chain, traditional natural food markets that are in the
Mhm.
area. Here in New Jersey, we have Moms, we have Greens,
Yeah. That's what
Natural
I
Food
was thinking.
Market.
Like, I could totally see you guys in a place like Greens for sure.
Yeah, and so we're really looking forward to what that does for us, and puts us on to a new trajectory and being able to expand.
Yeah, love it. So, as we kind of bring this down to a close, I want to ask you just a few more questions. I know we've talked about you being the original person, like in the kitchen and creating the recipe. And obviously, as you're growing, you're stepping out of that, right? So, what has it been like for you on a personal level to kind of like transition in terms of what your focus is as the founder and maybe even like letting go of some of the control with that a little bit?
I love this question because it is something that I've been really presented with over the last like few months.
Mhm.
So, I'm now not doing this by myself anymore. I brought in somebody to help out from a production side. I brought in somebody to help out from a sales and marketing side. And these people are really raw, like they're fresh. They came in with an enthusiasm and the fact that they love the product, they love the space, they want to be involved. But did they really come in with the skill set to do the thing, right? And so it's asked a lot of me to start to now transition out of this doer of things into now more of that leader of people role. And like, how do I
Mhm.
make sure that I'm setting up this person for success? And I think about all the times, something might occur where I want to say, or I want to like, not come down on them, right? Be like, oh,
Yeah.
why didn't you do this? Or why did you do
Yeah.
that? And immediately I stop from doing that and I just reflect quickly and I'm like, well, did I give this person everything that they needed to be successful in doing
Yeah.
that thing? Did I explain myself properly?
Sure.
And it
Mhm.
always comes back to me not doing that.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah. It's
realized
huge.
that there's now this transitioning point, as you're mentioning, where it's like, hey, we need to build a team in order to sustain the growth that we're having and we're looking to have over the next year, 2 years, 3 years. And so it's transitioning from, again, that doer and maker of things into this strategic mindset, into this leadership mindset that is always something I've looked forward to, but never actually had to do in
Do it.
tandem
Yeah.
at this sort of scale, if you would,
Yeah.
or in this way. And yeah, it's something I'm looking forward to. I constantly, have calls with advisors and mentors to me in this area and get coached every single day on how to do that best.
Yeah, that's I think one of the toughest parts about growing your business and something I hear like as a theme that comes up for people no matter what size their business is, like early on you realize it as the founder it's probably one of the areas where you make the most mistakes. And it comes back to what you said, asking yourself like did I give the person the tools that they needed to be successful to do this? And I believe that part of the struggle there comes from the fact that you as the founder are the doer and you had to be that person in order for you to even get to the point where you needed to add on the team member, right?
Hmm.
But so many people are like, oh, well, this person should just think like me. And the whole reason they don't think like you is the reason why they're not the founder. And
Right.
remembering that is so, so important. And it's very humbling for sure, too. But I appreciate that you take that critical eye on and say, like, did I give this person what they needed to be able to do that and develop these processes correctly? And remember that if I didn't develop the process itself and then communicate that, document that, well, now that's like a whole project in and of itself, too. And
Correct.
remembering that somebody coming in as a teammate, if you don't have those things like ready to go for them, they're not going to completely transform your life or take some massive thing off of your plate if there's kind of no structure around that yet.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I think a lot of that is where I spend my time now
Mhm.
today, right? Just
Sure.
like you mentioned, developing those strategies, developing those roadmaps, developing those visual assets, and contextualizing what it is that we need to do and how they're going to get there. And then, and you know what it is? It's the thing that kind of separates you, kind of as you mentioned, from being the founder is doing the thing.
Mhm.
Like thinking about those things abstractly sounds like big tasks, but the fact that you need to get in there and execute on it is what makes all the difference of being able to get to the next place that you want to get to. And I think that's something that I've always excelled at. It's not like, sitting in and relishing in the abstract. It's like, okay, there's
Mhm.
something abstract. How do I narrow this in
Execute. Yeah.
and execute on the thing?
Mhm.
And even if it's rough, even if it's a rough draft, just get it
Mhm.
out there, right? Get it
Right.
into the water system so that we can just see how it goes and then adjust it from there. And it winds up always working out, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so true. And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask this question. We know we have 4 flavors, but are there any new flavors on the roadmap that you can tease for us?
There are. I mean, we actually in September we launched a chocolate mousse, which has been said to be our best flavor so far,
Oh, I haven't
but
had that one. I got to try it.
it is delicious. Maybe I'll make a little side batch for
Okay.
you and send it
Thank you.
out. But bringing that fifth flavor out was a huge disruption to the production
Oh,
process,
I'm
and it
sure.
overwhelmed us extremely. So
Yeah.
we fulfilled our commitment to our consumers for that month, both on a
Okay.
wholesale and direct to consumer basis, but we quickly realized we couldn't maintain a fifth
That many
flavor.
flavors at once.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So, as we work with Rutgers, we're going to continue to, expand on maybe should we start to roll out different flavors, take back others, and really start to
Mhm.
see what
Like a
lands home.
seasonal sort of thing.
A seasonal thing. But
Okay.
we have the chocolate mousse. We have a coffee bar that's also been perfected and
You
done.
know, that was the one I was going to ask you about because we
And
talked
it
about
and
it
it
before.
has also gotten extremely good feedback. And then we're going to start to experiment with a peanut butter, and we're just going to have these
Mm.
things in our back pocket.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fun stuff we want to try to do, but we also want to stay realistic, right, with where
Totally.
we are
Mhm.
and what we're capable of doing, and the fact that we've really brought something special to the market, and we want to continue to have that presence and that sort of you know uh, uh, vision for everybody.
Yeah, but to your point about what we just said with like going out with the rough draft and actually executing, in a way, it's a good thing that you tried the chocolate mousse
Yep.
and saw that it might quote unquote break an aspect of the process because you wouldn't have known that otherwise. And now you have another goal to work towards to be like, what does this look like? Should we institute like flavor drops that are only like for certain periods of time? And like that in and of itself could be a totally different business model too, which is fun.
Yeah, absolutely right. And it was there's there's um there's something called sensitivity testing, right? Where
Mhm.
when you're building out strategies, whether it's forecasting models or
Yeah.
anything like that, where you adjust certain things or put in a new variable to say
Okay.
like, how is this going to affect and impact what's happening today?
Mhm.
And that was my way of kind of stress testing our
Sure.
kitchen
Yeah.
and being like, well, hey, I know we're going to be working with Rutgers on this journey to scale production. We can't do it today, but if we wanted to, we'd have to bring in somebody else, right? It
Gotcha.
would mean we need to bring on another person in the kitchen in order to do that. How does that affect the overall, financial stability of the company and things like that? So in a way, like you're saying, it was a learning experience, and it was important
Mhm.
to do it.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, obviously, with all this going on, you're a busy guy. So I want to be respectful of your time. And I appreciate you coming back for round two. I definitely want there to be a round three. And I asked you this question at the end of the first episode that we did together. But again, because we kind of took a little, a different take in this episode specifically, I bet you'll have a different answer. And thinking about everything we've discussed today, if you could leave somebody with only one thing to remember from this conversation, what would it be?
Yeah, I think it would be reflection, right? As I talked about, stepping back and needing to look inward before responding outward, that's something that has become a huge asset to my toolbox as a leader. So I think it would be the importance and impact reflection has on my abilities to be interpersonal, to
Mhm.
build stronger relationships, to be a leader, is through that analysis of the truth, right? And what's actually um, the truth about like the current state of things
Yeah.
before taking an action or following through with something. So yeah, I hope people can take that sentiment and that share and implement it into their own lives if they think it's worth it.
Yeah, I love that because even on like a fitness and nutrition level, that applies to nutrition too. When you think about food tracking, in a way, that's the whole point of it is like asking somebody to take a step back and like really look at like, what the heck did you eat today? Like, that's a version of reflecting that we skip over. I ask my clients to monitor what I call their biofeedback. How stressed were you today? What were your energy levels like? What was your quality of sleep? And I recently had a new client say to me, she's like, "So I'm going to develop a lot of self awareness during the process of working with you, right?" I'm like, "Hell
Mhm.
yeah." Because we're so busy day to day and we don't pay attention to these things. And yet, tying it into food, you got to eat. So it's like, let's make
Yeah.
sure we're doing this with purpose because it has to be done regardless. So I really love that. And I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
So, that kind of gave me something to reflect on and think about too today. Now,
Yeah.
last but not least, if everybody wants to get their hands on some Orca Bar, give us all the plugs. How do we do it? Website, Instagram, all that stuff we'll put in the show notes too to make sure everybody can follow along on the journey.
Absolutely. If you are interested in purchasing online, you can head to Orka, ORKA, bar, BAR.com, orkabar.com, and buy any one of our four flavors. We also have a variety box if you're interested in just kind of experimenting and seeing which one you like the most, which gives you our cookies and cream, raspberry, mint, and vanilla in one nice package. So you can experiment there. Or you can go onto our website, click the store tab, and find out all of the locations that we are in throughout New Jersey, a little bit of New York and Pennsylvania today. Pop into one of those locations. I'm sure those business owners would love to see your face
Yeah.
and know that you came in for an Orca bar. And please reach out, DM us, email us, send us your thoughts and feedback. And if you, want us to help you try and get the product and things like that, we're always willing to work with people so they can really experience what it is that we're coming out with.
Love it. So happy that the world of social media was able to connect us and we're continuing to hear more about your journey, to be able to support it in any way that we can, even if it's as simple as getting this podcast out there and hearing more about the developing story of where it was, where it's going, where you see yourself in 3, 5 years from now. And I'm just excited for the day that I see you guys in a place like Whole Foods being able to say, "Hey, I know where that all started." And I think that's really cool. So I appreciate you coming back on the show for a second time. And thank you so much. And for everybody who listened today, clearly, if you want to get your hands on a sweet treat, and I know you guys from being in my DMs that you care about that because we do talk a lot about dessert on my Instagram page, definitely go ahead and check out Orca Bar. Share this with a friend if they're interested in hearing more about Steven's story and the expansion of the product, the business, and the company as it continues to grow. But as always, from wherever you guys are listening from, we appreciate you for being here, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll catch you next week. Thanks, Stephen.
Thanks, Krysta.